I pictured Satan as this bright white angel named Lucifer, who was thrown out of heaven for trying to dethrone God. He then turned into a snake to deceive Eve, and now tempts all humans to reject God so he can torture them in hell.
That's mean.
Maybe you grew up hearing something similar, but the story I just told you is not in the Bible, at least not the way it's been told. The real biblical Satan is very different from the way most of us would picture him in our minds. In this video, I'm going to explain the 4 things that most Christians get wrong about Satan. So if Satan doesn't look like this, or this, then what does he look like? Believe it or not, the Bible actually tells us what he might have looked like. In the book of Ezekiel, the prophet compares the evil king of Tyre to another evil king, a spiritual king. Many scholars believe this spiritual king is a reference to Satan. I'll explain why in a minute, but for now the important thing to note is that Ezekiel says that this evil spiritual being was a cherub. No, not those chubby little winged baby sculptures from your grandma's house. Biblical cherubim actually looked like this. In the Bible, cherubim often appeared as animal-human hybrids with wings, and their job was to guard God's throne in heaven. Some appeared to have the face of an ox, others the face of a lion or eagle, but there is a good argument to be made that some of the cherubim had the appearance of a snake. For the longest time, the snake in the Garden of Eden puzzled me. The Bible tells us that this snake was Satan. So then how does such an evil being get into God's perfect Garden of Eden? To answer this, we need to turn to the book of Ezekiel, chapter 28. As mentioned earlier, this passage describes an evil spiritual king. Listen to how this prophet begins to describe this divine being. You were the seal of perfection, full of wisdom, perfect in beauty. You were in Eden, the garden of God. Interesting. Every precious stone was your covering, and then it lists all of the different stones and some of the features that this being had. Now watch this. It says that you were the anointed cherub who covers. That's what we just looked at earlier. It says that you were on the holy mountain of God. You walked back and forth in the midst of the fiery stones. This basically is telling us that this being was in the presence of God. You were perfect or complete in your ways from the day you were created until iniquity was found in you. In this passage, we learn that the being was an anointed cherub who was in the Garden of Eden, and as we are about to see, rebelled against God. As we have already learned, a cherub is a divine being who guarded God's throne. So we know this isn't a description of the human beings, Adam or Eve. So this leaves us with the snake. Now here's where it gets interesting. The root word for snake in Hebrew can also mean diviner. And this would make sense since the ancients often associated snakes with the divine. This is why the Egyptian pharaohs would always wear a snake on their head, and why snakes were often depicted as divine throne guardians in ancient mythology. Take a look at these ancient Israelite seals and notice what image is on them: snakes with wings. Some scholars have even argued that the divine throne guardians called seraphim, described in the book of Isaiah, are actually snake-like cherubim. Now take a look at the snake in Genesis 3. This snake has the ability to talk, knows God's commands better than the humans do, enough to manipulate them, and as we are going to see in a moment, is given an unusual punishment. An ancient person who read Genesis 3 wouldn't have pictured a snake like this, but rather a divine snake-like being like the cherub described in Ezekiel. Let's take a look at what happens next to this cherub in Ezekiel 28. Okay, picking up in verse 16. By the abundance of your trading, you became filled with violence. Therefore, watch what God does. I cast you as a profane thing out of the mountain of God. Now we know that the mountain of God is a reference to the Garden of Eden, as referenced up here. He says, your heart was lifted up because of your beauty. You corrupted your wisdom for the sake of your splendor. And now this is key. He says, I cast you to the ground. I laid you before kings that they might gaze at you. Notice that he says, I cast you to the ground. This punishment is very similar to the punishment that we see the snake in Genesis 3 have. Let's take a look. God says, "Because you have done this, you are cursed more than all cattle and more than every beast of the field. On your belly you shall go, and you shall eat dust all the days of your life." The curse is similar. God says, "You shall eat dust." Because we know snakes don't literally eat dust, we know this is a metaphor for something else. When you compare the curse given to Satan in Ezekiel 28 to the curse given to Satan in Genesis 3, it seems that they are describing the same event. When you put these two passages together, you get a good picture of how Satan fell along with Adam and Eve. Satan was in the Garden of Eden, a place where the Bible tells us God walked in the cool of the day, and where some of the cherubim and the first humans lived. Satan was one of these beautiful divine cherubim who appeared as a snake or had snake-like features. Satan then sinned by deceiving Eve into eating the forbidden fruit, and as a result was cursed by God by being cast out of his presence and made to roam the earth to this day. This naturally leads us to ask the question, what is Satan doing today, and what kind of power does he have? But before I answer this, there's something you should know about this divine rebel, Satan. Satan isn't actually his name.
What?
Satan is a Hebrew word that means the adversary, and it's used in the Bible to refer to many different people who were adversaries, such as enemy kings of Israel and even an angel following God's commands. The first time Satan is used in the Bible is in the book of Numbers. The angel of the Lord is standing in the way of Balaam as a Satan against him. He does this to deliver a message from God to Balaam. The angel of the Lord is actually doing God's will by being a Satan for God. Weird, right? But by the time you get to the New Testament, the word Satan is mostly used as the well-deserved title for the spiritual rebel we know today as Satan, along with the Greek title diabolos, or devil, meaning slanderer. But neither of these titles are proper names. This has led some people to believe that Lucifer is his actual name, but this is also a common misconception. The term Lucifer comes from the book of Isaiah, chapter 14. The text describes a spiritual being called Hallel ben Shehar, whose pride made him rebel against God. Hallel ben Shehar means bright morning star in Hebrew, and in ancient mythology was used to describe the planet Venus, which would outshine the sun at dawn. This is why the Latin translators use the word Lucifer, which means Venus in Latin, in place of Hallel ben Shehar. The spiritual rebel that we often refer to as Satan today doesn't actually have a proper name in the Bible, which I think is actually fitting. A proper name would give him just a little bit too much honor that he doesn't deserve. Now, when it comes to Satan's power, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. He has a lot of it, but not as much as you might think. The Bible says that the whole world lies under the sway of the wicked one. Satan rules this world currently, but his power is limited and comes nowhere even remotely close to the power of God. For example, he can't read your mind. The Bible says that God knows our thoughts from afar off. However, he is very smart. Ezekiel says Satan is full of all wisdom, and Genesis 3 called him cunning. This means that although Satan can't read your thoughts, he is very good at predicting your next move. Another thing Satan can't do is be everywhere at once. The Bible says that the eyes of the Lord are in every place, keeping watch on the evil and the good. Satan wants to maximize the amount of evil he can inflict in the world, and he does this by influencing powerful people, which means unless you're the President of the United States or a billionaire watching this video, my guess is Satan himself probably won't ever visit you in your lifetime. However, you may encounter one of Satan's demons, but that's a topic for a future video. The Bible tells us we should fear God, not Satan, that when we submit to God, Satan and his demons will get away from us. Satan only has limited time on this earth before he is thrown in hell for eternity to be punished for all his evil deeds. He won't be the ruler of hell like many people think. He will be receiving eternal punishment. But before this happens, the Bible predicts that Satan is going to possess one man who will rule the entire world for 7 years. Click here to find out how.